The story begins with Yohu-Coatl, a young boy and heir to the throne of a small village called AZTEC. Led by his father, Toltekatzen, one morning, when Yohuali wakes up from one of his constant nightmares where he's always being chased by a huge bull and a bat in a deserted land, his father tells him their god is trying to pass him a message. Yohuali doesn't believe in their god because he had lost his mother a while ago, and from what he clearly remembers, their god didn't do anything to save her regardless of how much they prayed. Yohu heads out to join the busy activities of the village and tries to join the warriors to train, but he still gets interrupted by his father, who bores him with a lengthy pep talk about how to become a better ruler than he is. While they converse, they notice a group of boats heading towards their village, and they're all in shock because no one from their village has ever seen anything like it. While they mistake them for gods, Toltekatzen tells them to listen closely to what they say, but pay more attention to how they act, to discern. The group of sailors approaches and introduces themselves as Spanish conquistadors, led by Captain Hernan Cortez. They claim to have come in the name of King Charles, the King of Castilla. Toltekatzen asks what brought them to their village, and Cortez replies that he and his men ran out of supplies while exploring the New World, and have come to make a trade with them for supplies. Toltekatzen refuses their offer for a trade, but instead extends his hospitality by welcoming them into the village to stay for a while. Although his men seem to be against the idea of welcoming the foreigners into their land, Toltekatzen tells them he'll consult the judgment of their gods to determine what's right for them. The men get offered food and drinks, which they willingly accept. While they feast, Cortez's right-hand man asks why they're wasting time settling down when their primary assignment is to raid the city for gold. Hernan responds that although gold is what would make the authority that sent them on the mission happy, his plans are far more than such riches. He has been sent on a different mission by his god. After their meal, he gathers the people of the town around and shows them some inventions which he refers to as wonders from his world. The people are amazed by a painting he shows them, but all the more impressed by the gun he fires for them for show. Later that night, while Toltekatzen does his consultation rituals to the gods of their land, Yohu bothers him with questions about the foreigners. He points out that the men seem more likely to be gods than the fictional forces they constantly pray to, and his father snaps at him, saying they could equally be as dangerous as they are powerful. He gets an eerie feeling about the whole situation, so he makes him promise to head to the city to meet a certain man named Alkatzen, if things go haywire. The next morning, the foreigners express their gratitude to the villagers for their generosity and hospitality. Afterward, they ask for directions to Tenochtitlan, the great capital city. Toltekatzen immediately refuses, explaining that their customs strictly forbid anyone from revealing the location to outsiders. The foreigners press further, suggesting that Toltekatzen's son accompany them as an escort instead. Though reluctant at first, Toltekatzen is eventually persuaded by Yohu, who insists he can handle himself. Before letting him go, Toltekatzen gives Yohu a clay figure of his late mother as a charm for protection, and reminds him once again to seek out Alkatzen if anything goes wrong. He then assures Cortez that he will personally request permission from the king on their behalf, and instructs them to remain in the village as guests until he returns. The villagers, on the other hand, are fascinated by Cortez's right-hand man's blonde hair. They begin bowing and treating him like a deity, which infuriates him rather than flatters him. Losing his temper, he draws his rifle and shoots one of the worshippers dead. The act shocks everyone, and Toltekatzen erupts in anger, shouting at the foreigners. He swears that as long as he lives, he'll never let them set foot into the main city, and Cortez responds according to his declaration. He draws his sword and kills Toltekatzen on the spot, throwing the entire village into fear and chaos. The village erupts at their leader's death. Panic spreads as Cortez's men turn on the people, cutting them down without mercy. Some villagers try to fight back with spears and clubs, but they are no match for the foreigners' advanced weapons and are quickly overpowered. In the confusion, Yohu manages to slip away into the bushes, though a stray bullet grazes his shoulder as he flees. He keeps running until he is far from the sounds of gunfire and eventually stumbles into a small pond, where exhaustion and blood loss cause him to collapse. As he drifts in and out of consciousness, he falls into a strange trance. In the vision, he first sees his mother reaching out to him gently, but her form suddenly twists and transforms into the same terrifying nightmare he always has, the one where wild animals chase him relentlessly. Yohu jolts awake to find himself lying inside a dimly lit tent. Heading out, he sees no one but the Bat God, who had been tending to him. Keeping his cool, he simply asks for directions out of the place, but the god tells him that his visions aren't just nightmares, but things that are destined to happen. Confused and unsettled, Yohu stumbles away and wanders until he finds himself inside a dark cave. Suddenly, hundreds of bats swarm after him, forcing him to run for his life. When he finally escapes through a river and emerges on the other side, he realizes he has reached the outskirts of the great city. Without wasting another moment, he seeks out Akatsun and breathlessly recounts everything that has happened. He is granted an audience with the king the following morning to report the whole incident. While he describes the evil vices of Cortez, the king's high priest intercepts him, trying to change his narrative. The king then decides that if the foreigners truly are gods, as the high priest claims, they will find a way to the city on their own. After the hearing, Yohu realizes he has to be prepared in case they show up, so he asks Akatsun to train him to become the greatest warrior the world has ever known. The high priest prays fervently to his god for guidance, and it reveals itself to him. The god instructs him to persuade the king to allow the foreigners entry into their lands when they eventually arrive. Meanwhile, Yohu undergoes weeks of harsh, disciplined training, pushing his body and mind to the limit. His efforts pay off, and he eventually becomes the strongest warrior in the land, earning the title of Head of the Warriors. However, the Spanish conquistadors continue their advance through the region, raiding smaller villages and taking whatever they please. Their campaign eventually brings them to Tenochtitlan. As the god had instructed, the high priest speaks to the king and convinces him to allow the foreigners to enter the great city. When Cortez finally stands before the king, he introduces himself and shakes hands with the king, an action which is strongly forbidden by the city's traditions. The people watching are visibly unsettled by the gesture. Their unease grows worse when a comet suddenly appears, hanging ominously in the sky over the city. Seeing this as a terrible omen, the king laments bitterly and blames the high priest, accusing him of offending the gods and bringing their wrath upon the land. That night, Yohu, who is now more desperate than ever, dons a disguise and launches a surprise attack on the foreigners. However, his efforts are quickly crushed when Cortez's blonde-haired right-hand man overpowers him with ease, making Yohu's training arc feel completely pointless. Just as Cortez is about to finish him off, a mysterious young woman wearing a panther costume leaps in to help him. She leaves Cortez a permanent parting gift on his face before escaping with Yohu. Once they are safely away, the panther girl scolds Yohu for acting recklessly, reminding him that running headlong into danger without a proper plan would only secure him a meet and greet session with his parents, if that's his intention. She urges him to think before he acts next time if he truly wants to seek revenge. Cortez, however, doesn't seem pleased with his parting gift. He destroys their boats and orders his men to find their attackers if they ever want to return home. Yohu expresses his frustration about being so powerless on his own against the men to Akatsun, who still ends up directing him back to the Panther Girl. Out of options, Yohu meets up with her and begs her to help him steal a few equipment from the foreigners' base. Later that night, they are both able to successfully invade the foreigners' territory and sneakily steal some of their technological devices without getting noticed. The following morning, Yohu takes Akatsun to the cave where he was pursued by bats on his way to the main city. On their way there, they notice that a good number of trees from the forest have been chopped down, but they read no meaning into it. Getting to the cave, Yohu decided to turn it into his base, where he studies the foreigners' equipment and tries to invent his own with a Katzen as his loyal help. One day, Yohu has a nightmare where the Bat God appears to him and starts to give him a load of crap about how he cannot win against Cortez because of a certain balance that has been set to exist. He expresses his frustration to a Katzen, who assures him that the gods are going to use him for their bidding and that he'd eventually have to submit to their will. The king, on the other hand, banishes the high priest from their city for failing him. As time goes on, Yohu becomes more troublesome to Cortez and his men, as he keeps intercepting their operations and making their stay in the city difficult. With his advancements and better disguise, he single-handedly infiltrates one of their operations in the forest one night and takes down a good number of Cortez's men before setting the place ablaze. The following morning, Cortez and his men complain to the king and announce their departure from the city. To be on the safer side, they request that the king be their escort back home. The king sees it as a means to establish a better relationship between both of their peoples, but his people are against it. Yohu then volunteers to go in his stead, and Cortez agrees. In the mountains, the high priest wonders where he went wrong because all he did was follow the instructions of the gods. His god appears to him once more and tells him everything is going according to plan and that he should go back to the city, which he does. Knowing that he still cannot set foot in the palace, he heads home to be with his family and convinces them to submit to the will of the gods. When he wakes up the following morning, he finds out that the god has murdered his entire family. The god then reveals itself as an evil god that had been putting on a disguise solely to deceive him and make him do evil things. The high priest remembers his mother's last advice to him about smiling more, and he goes absolutely insane. He paints up his face with her ashes and blood and starts to laugh mischievously like that one character you have in mind. A few days later, Yohu dresses up in his bat costume and intercepts Cortez and some of his men, who he notices heading into the forest for some type of shady operation. He takes down the men easily and clashes vigorously with Cortez, who then reveals that he has sent his right-hand man to kill the king back in the city and that he is just acting as a distraction. Without wasting any time, Yohu snatches a horse and heads back to the city where a festival is currently being held. By the time he gets there, it's already too late. Cortez's men have taken over the palace, killing most of the guards and taking the king as a prisoner. Cortez uses the king as leverage to steal gold from the citizens of the town, and although most of them rebel, they eventually have to submit. Yohu determines that, to get the remaining warriors to stand up against the foreigners and fight effectively, he would have to free the king, so he comes up with a plan to aid the whole process. At nightfall, he puts on his bat costume and sneaks into the palace, where he confronts the king. The king, who happens to be seeing him in the costume for the first time, mistakes him for the bat god and begins to worship him. Yohu tells the king the foreigners are not real gods, and that there is no reason to be afraid of them. He instructs him to summon his warriors and tell them to fight the foreigners back to secure their freedom. Later that night, while the people offer all their treasures to Cortez, the king rushes out and tries to order the people to rise up against the foreigners. However, before he can speak, the high priest appears and sends him to Wonderland. The people go into rage and start to fight back, and they are shortly joined by the Batman ripoff, who leads the attack as he goes up against Cortez. When it looks like the people are finally starting to win, the foreigners reveal their trump card as they begin to shoot cannons at them. Panther Girl tries to intercept them, but due to the distraction already caused, Cortez gains the momentum and stabs Yohu. Thanks to Panther Girl, Yohu is able to slip away from Cortez. He orders a cutscene to take him to the top of the temple to reveal his own trump card. At the top of the temple, Yohu reveals his latest technological advancement, a bat glider. Despite his injury, he uses it to glide through the sky while he launches little bombs at the enemies. This acts as a motivation for the people who praise him and fight back harder. Cortez's men still have the upper hand, so Yohu prays to the Bat God and finally submits himself fully. He then attempts a risky move and ends up knocking down most of Cortez's men. Cortez charges at him once more to kill him, and the two get into a heated battle where Yohu clearly has the upper hand. During the battle, the Bat God appears in person and takes out Cortez's right-hand man and most of the foreigners. As Yohu is about to put an end to the evil boss, one of Cortez's men shoots at him, making him bleed out as Cortez runs for safety. At the end of the battle, the comet, which had been hovering in the sky, disappears, but Yohu slowly passes away. At the outskirts of the city, Cortez is approached by the high priest, who promises to help him get what he wants. A few days pass, and bats parade the Bat Cave where Yohu has been buried. Then all of a sudden, he comes back to life. The end.